Greetings and welcome back to Lockhorn's Banger TV's weekly metal debate show. If you're watching this in the archive, remember this is a live show that plays every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to Banger TV. And thanks to everyone for finally pushing us over the 50K mark. But in the spirit of today's episode, as Yngwie Malmstein famously said, more is more, so let's get us to 100K, shall we? This week we're doing something a little bit different. It's not about the bands, it's about the albums. The pivotal, the essential, the important albums that make up the history of this music we love called heavy metal. And this week we're tackling power metal, and to help me with that is the one and the only Martin Popoff. Hello, sir.
Sam? Yes, good seeing you again.
Good to see you as well. Welcome back to the Banger Bar. For those of you who don't know, Martin has joined us in the past and, of course, has a lot to offer on all things power metal, and in fact appeared in our power metal episode for our series Metal Evolution. So, what have you been up to?
Well, just working on a lot of books. I've got a Rush book that I just finished, an AC/DC book, doing a Zeppelin book, just finished a Montrose book, so yeah, lots on the go.
Cool, cool. Well, I mean, I'm glad you're with me because, I mean, I've got my At the Gates shirt on, which is, I guess, a dead ringer that I'm not a power metal fan. However, I did come equipped with my my horn Stein because I figured since I can't grow a beard, I should at least have something power metal to drink out of. So, how do you think this is going to go? I mean, power metal, choosing the top 10 albums of all time. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. It's a nice format where, you know, we're going to talk about something I pick, something we say is indisputable. We're going to have kind of a 5 on the go, and then the fans are going to chip in. So it's kind of neat getting to 10. 10's going to be pretty tough because, you know, there are a lot of albums, and this genre is marked by quality and consistency of production, of playing, of everything. So, you know, it's going to be more or less making sure the main bands we want picked are represented.
And it's a pretty deep history, too, so there's a lot to choose from, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I would sink without you. Okay, as you all know, this show is all about the chat. All about what all of you out there have to say about the topic at hand. So I want to give a shout out and to say, you know, this is truly a global metal episode. We've got people joining us from Belfast. We've got Israel and Iraq and Iran. Welcome all. Cool. Wales and North Wales. And Venezuela, we got Brazil, home of Angra, who undoubtedly will come up today. India, Sweden, and our regulars from Portugal and Belgium. Guyana, welcome. Philadelphia, Las Vegas, Ottawa, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick. And everybody who's joining us from Florida, stay safe, stay dry. Thank you for joining us. So, as always, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, when you comment, we really want to hear the why around the comment that you're making. This isn't just about choosing your favorite album. We want to know why you feel so strongly and why you should make the essentials a list. And to help moderate, officiate, and keep us all in line, toe the line, is Lisa Ladiseur. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, hello.
And of course, her favorite tool, of course, is the following.
It's true. I did bring the bell. It's not a gong. Someone said we need a more metal bell.
We do. It's definitely not a metal bell.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
We need a Herman Rare bell. Oh, first bad joke of the power metal episode. Will the Scorpions make it? We shall see. Let's move on. Okay, so Martin, just to kind of get things going here, we want to do something similar we do with all our episodes, is kind of lay some ground rules around the key characteristics of the genre. So what are the key characteristics of power metal?
Well, I think characteristics, I would say, you know, it is a traditional metal that's based on sort of classical tones. You know, you go back to Deep Purple in rock, Rainbow Rising, the Judas Priest canon of the late 70s, starting with Sad Wings. So you get, you know, high operatic vocals, you get lyrics, not a lot of boy-girl stuff, a lot of history, a lot of, you know, Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy and medieval stuff like that. Guitar playing's a big thing, a lot of speedy guitar playing, twin leads, keyboards are totally allowed, pumping double bass drums, crazy dramatic epic, intros to songs, long keyboard intros, spoken word intros, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, it is a very classical and traditional, and some say sort of pompous and epic and melodramatic and thespian type of.
Well,
metal.
we kind of got into that when we did the episode.
Right.
In many ways, power metal became a term, a sort of the emperor in new clothes, if you will, in the sense that it was traditional or classic metal, sort of renamed because all these other subgenres popped up, like thrash metal and death metal and so on.
Exactly.
So it is it's in many ways just a different word for a style of metal that's been with us for a long time. So before we jump into the albums, we thought it would be worth revisiting the chart that we updated when we did the power metal episode for Lock Horns. So if we could bring up the chart there, Martin, you can see. So we've got Halloween, Iced Earth, Camelot, Manowar, Hammerfall, Yngwie, Primal Fear, Virgin Steel, Blind Guardian, Stratovarius were the bands that were already part of the chart, or the ones we prepared magnets for. And then during the course of the conversation, we added Running Wild, Gamma Ray, Sabaton, Omen, Angra, Gravedigger, Manila Road, and Edguy. And what are your thoughts on that
Very
list?
interesting. I have a feeling that a lot of those bands really aren't going to make this when it comes to the albums, because that's almost as many bands as we have for albums. So some of those bands are not going to happen on here. I don't think Omen or Manila Road or even Virgin Steel, have been in my discussion and looking at my own lists of 20, 30, even 40 albums.
Sure.
So some of those bands won't make it. Other bands will make it. And also I think there's an interesting thing where a lot of the bands that are the roots or the proto of power metal, we are leaving those out. We're being disciplined about that by starting it, in the mid 80s, and then moving forward, and then possibly even having a little bit of a stop period based on, when the genre was biggest. Well,
you make a good point, because it's almost like if this were a chemistry experiment, we're sort of boiling down the essential elements of power metal even further. And as you say, all those bands, or some of them at least, are going to kind of fall away as we kind of attempt to crystallize. There's a very power metal. We should have crystals to crystallize this subgenre that is heavy metal. But before we do that, we are going to do what, Lisa?
Well, first I'm going to tell you that people like your shirt.
Okay.
Martin?
Well, this has a power metal story itself, which we'll get into at some point. So.
Or now.
Okay, or now. So Riot is actually one of the early
tell
bands.
us about your shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. So Halloween is going to be very important in this. The mid '80s is important, but Riot is one of the rare sort of American bands that is sort of classed with starting this with Privilege of Power and Thundersteel, 88 and 90. So they're kind of like a story where it's starting to pick up, and one of the rare American bands we'll talk about.
Not at the gates. I'm not getting at the gates.
No,
Red in the Sky is ours. Not really a some melody in the guitar there, but I'm going to shut up. Yes, Lisa.
I'm cutting off my own tangent that I started with much apologies to say it's time for the legend.
Yes.
That's where we go.
Here we go. Okay, so a new feature on Lock Horns is whether we're debating bands or we're debating albums. We sort of right off the bat establish the legendary, in this case, album that essentially is the album that we couldn't possibly do without. Right. You gave this some thought. What's your pick?
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of people agree, I think, right off the bat. Halloween, Keeper of the Seven Keys, 2 or 1 could work for this.
Yeah.
But basically, the idea is, this is the first post-Maiden band. We can talk about Dio and Maiden and even Black Sabbath, all sorts of things before. But basically, what happens with Halloween, and they have an EP and an album before this, and the part 1 before this. But this is basically Iron Maiden on steroids. This is where when we did the power metal episode, we talked about Schlager music and these sort of syrupy, insipid melodies that go through this stuff, and you get that in this band. We also call those like soccer chant melodies, right?
Yeah.
So you get a lot of that sing-along stuff with Halloween. Michael Kiske, you get a great, high vocalist, going back to those Rob Halford roots. Double bass drum, the leads, everything. So this is essentially a speedier, younger, young, loud and snotty version of Iron Maiden, and that's kind of a great place to start with power metal.
Well, what we want to do right now is go to a clip. This is going back to 2010 in the backyard, I believe, of Kai Hansen's house in Germany, when I asked him specifically about the Keeper albums and why they were so important. Here's Kai.
Cycling back to Halloween's music, I mean, the Keeper albums get held up as very important records. Why did they make such an impact?
Well, first of all, I think because they were good, and because they were special, sounding different. We had a great singer at that time. He still is a great singer. And we had this commercial element. So we had songs that had the hard edge and the metal spirit, but at the same time being commercial. Even the sound, it was not so harsh and rough edged. It was more polished in a way, more clean, but that was good at that time. Then we had this fun element, which was kind of new to a band like us, because let's say our predecessors like Scorpions, except were more like serious bands, and we were just like a bunch of clowns in many performances and in the way we put ourselves to the light, that was different, definitely. Not to take everything so serious, and we were not evil and mean and whatever. We were just a bunch of idiots, and people liked that, I guess.
Yeah.
So that came along with the whole thing, and everything was perfect. Just.
So very cool interview there with Kai. Some interesting things he has to say about kind of the commerciality, the accessibility of those albums, but also in a way, I think, with the benefit of hindsight, grabbing a little bit from the speed and intensity that was starting to come in metal at that time.
Yeah, and he also talks about how it's, we're a bunch of goofballs, or the happy element too. I mean, this is kind of like a happy, uplifting music.
Yeah.
Whether there's, very much comedy to it, I wouldn't say so much, but it's more like this is very uplifting melodies.
But at the same time, much more powerful riffing than, say, an Iron Maiden album. Anyway, we have some comments from the board. Let's see what people have to say. Horror Master, welcome back, says that Keeper of the Seven Keys has to be under consideration. I mean, who hasn't gone to the top of their beds and sing out loud, "It's Halloween"? And if you say you haven't, you're a fucking liar. Martin, I know you've done that. I don't think I have. Infinite Possibility says Halloween is the epitome of power metal to me. Paul Leach, Halloween, Keeper of the Seven Keys, because of its influence on the late 80s, early 90s bands all the way through to today. And I'm not going to try and do that. Something Kim, Keeper of the Seven Keys still had a bit of a thrash influence in there. I think that's why it's easier for people who don't like power metal to enjoy. Jamie Laszlo says Keeper of the Seven Keys might be the grandfather album of power metal. Yeah, well, I guess they're the legend for a reason. And Cicada Sond says we need to discuss Keeper. Each track not only embraces the primary characteristics of the subgenre, but also display the German quintet as serious musicians with the melodic contour. Here we go. Harmonic minor and natural minor keys. I gotta pull out my notepad. Musical articulations, Aeolian scales. My favorite flavor of ice cream is Aeolian. And musical integrity and confidence, rhythmic precision, dynamic changes from fortissimo to mezzo piano or piano and classical musicianship while maintaining the metal mentality of the scene. Wow. The album can be considered crossover because it appeals to both classical and contemporary musicians and music listeners. Believe me, I may be 18, but I do know what I'm talking about. Sam,
Nice.
Undoubtedly, you're welcome to do a mic drop, or would it be a sword drop on power metal? Not quite sure. Cicada, that was fantastic. And an insight into the fact that a lot of power metal fans have an affinity for classical music.
Absolutely,
Really-
yeah. And when we talked about it in the episode, it was quite interesting. I mean, students come up through that classical music tradition way more so than they come up in America. And in America, we talked about how, not going the school route, but the idea is that, American music comes up through the blues and rhythm and blues a
Right.
bit more so.
So, at the risk of giving it away early, I think that classical reference is a good segue to the
Absolutely.
guest choice is
Yeah.
another feature. Always we give our guests the opportunity to get another album up there that they feel is essential
Yeah.
to the conversation. So, what's your choice, Martin?
Yeah, I went with Yngwie Malmstein's Rising Force Marching Out. It's his second solo album. It's the one with more vocal songs on it and stuff. And basically, I wanted to pick something early, but I like the idea of us being disciplined and not going back to the real roots of things. So this is 85, I believe. And it's got I Am a Viking and I'll See the Light Tonight. All these great songs with again these, it just seems like everything's elevated. He's playing like crazy, the whole sweep picking thing. I mean, so you've got the lyrics, definitely the classical melodies, and lots of great guitar soloing. So yeah, in many ways he's a straight line through Stratovarius and all sorts of stuff. So these two are kind of like they're a little different than each other. This one's got the thrash, and this one's got way more of the classical and way more of the Ritchie Blackmore.
Sure.
shit.
At the risk of overusing our favorite line from all of our movies, practically more is more, and nothing could epitomize Yngwie and power metal better than that line. Okay, Lisa, we'll go to the board and see what people have to say. Nick Ottavaiano is back. Rising Force. Come on, guys. It's well known this record is as shred as it gets, so goddamn fierce. Yngwie is actually undeniable. Derek Westra, yes. Marching Out is great. Artur Felipe Castana is back. Rising Force, yes. And Attaboy says good album. But is it power metal or neoclassical? Are we splitting hairs here? What's
Well,
the
yeah, so power metal goes into progressive metal and symphonic metal with Nightwish and
Right.
Oceanborn and Wishmaster and all that. So yeah, this goes in a few directions. It can go in a thrash direction a little bit with Iced Earth, although we're definitely going to argue Iced Earth, I think, is part of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. This could go down that road a little more to your Symphony X's and your Nightwishes, I suppose.
But I think point being hugely influential.
Yeah.
Sent
Absolutely.
millions of guitar players to their bedrooms trying to learn how to play along with Bach, Vivaldi, and Wagner. Lisa, are we going to do some album ads from the crowd,
so
from the
many
masses,
album
from the
ads.
hordes?
So many album ads. We do have a comment here echoing what you just said about Yngwie's influence.
Okay,
on all the
Zane
guitar
Knight
players.
says, listen to pretty much any power metal album and you'll hear Yngwie's influence on the guitar. So there you go. Hello, Yngwie. Hello, April. We miss you. It's been a while. But what's next?
I think people want to talk about Blind Guardian.
People want to talk about Blind Guardian. Okay.
What would be your pick, Martin, for the Blind Guardian
Well,
album?
I guess Nightfall and Middle Earth. I mean, do we have? Is this this is one of our
Yep.
5 that we have here?
Here we are.
Okay, so based on the Silmarillion, right? The whole Lord of the Rings Tolkien situation, but this one specifically Silmarillion. I mean, well, again, we get a German band. It's almost like this is the baby Halloween, and Halloween is the baby Iron Maiden.
Right.
And Hansi Kirsch, we get a great power metal vocalist, but not that super high guy. More of the thespian Shakespearean. You can see him dressed with the sleeves and all that, and the
Thespian.
pantaloons.
First, you heard it here first.
So another neat thing about Blind Guardian is they're one of these few bands that paid their dues. They were around in the power metal nadir, the void, starting in the late '80s, when we can talk about when power metal's big period was, but
Sure.
but it basically dropped off after this album essentially. '88 to about '95, it was pretty quiet, and there were a few bands that were in there toiling away, like Halloween, Gamma Ray,
Maybe
and
thrash
Blind
and death
Guardian.
metal were kind of taking the lion's
Well,
share
and
of the
grunge
attention.
and
grunge,
alternative,
of course.
yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, Artur is back. He agrees, I think. Blind Guardian, Nightfall, and Middle Earth. There have been a lot of bands that used Lord of the Rings influences, but none like Blind Guardian. Thespian, as Martin has called it. They told a whole story on this album, so to me it's an essential power metal album. So interesting
It's a very good
suggestion.
point.
Is it a concept album?
Yes, concepts are an important thing for
Right.
most of these bands will do a concept album or
Yeah.
two.
Good
or
point.
they'll even follow up their earlier classic with another concept album too.
Right.
Yeah.
Big. They love the story in power metal. Pedro Andres Hernandez agrees. Nightfall and Middle Earth is an absolute must. And I think we've got one more. Dizchu, Imaginations and Nightfall are tied for me. Mateus Evangelista, Nightfall and Middle Earth is the obvious choice. And Shark Crusher 13, Nightfall is as power metal as it gets. Fantasy, speed, epic, yes. It has everything that defines power metal. All right. Any other albums, Lisa? We're going to go to the board, or are we going to let Martin Popoff run the show here?
Well, I'm trying to keep track of the board. There's a lot of records.
Yeah.
People do want to talk about Manowar.
Okay.
Okay.
What do we do about that?
Manowar is
What do
an
we do with
interesting
Manowar?
one. So I would say they belong in this, but they're even going further back. I mean, they started in '82, and they also they're kind of a funny one because, well, they're a funny one for a lot of reasons we know, but they're funny because they don't really have the power metal sound so much. Their production values are really grungy and dirty, but they have the power metal concept. The singing about metal is a big thing.
Yeah.
The singing about battles and wars and Vikings and stuff is a big thing. You know, they do stress playing, although it's more like Joey and his bass playing or whatever. But they're considered a huge power metal influence and grandfathers of the whole thing. I would go with Hail to England from 1984. But again, now you're going even before this, and you're also picking something that doesn't exactly sound right. So
Right.
this sounds so right, and this sounds so right.
Well, I mean, the other point maybe to consider is that this is an American band. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how this is a predominantly European
Yeah,
style.
so it's interesting. The American side of it, I mean, their power metal in the early days.
Hail to all England or Hail to
Hail
England?
to England.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, in the early days, power metal meant something different. It meant almost like a pure form of metal that was you know, didn't have a lot of humor in it. It wasn't hair metal. It wasn't thrash. It wasn't a lot of different things. So basically, you had this kind of meat and potatoes working man's metal, you know, all these early albums on Metal Blade. So this is there. I would put Metal Church in that department.
Right.
You know, even Riot, although Riot didn't really pick up. But some of these guys we had on our list, Manila Road, Virgin
Yep.
Steel, Omen. But Manowar, it definitely has to belong. You know, some might say go up to Kings of Metal, so you put it up into this region here where. But you know, you look at those album covers; they're all illustrations. They're all like got their muscles really big and stuff. So they belong, but it's a little bit of a question mark.
Okay.
Which album to put?
We'll put them under the question mark for now and just see what the board has to say.
Okay.
The Fujak says Manowar. Gotta be way up on the top of the list. Been doing it forever, and they are pure power metal. So a little bit of consensus there. But Lisa, I think what we're seeing here is maybe some other bands we need to move on to.
Well, we can come back to Manowar,
Right.
but there are definitely some other bands that are getting tossed out a lot.
Okay, Ricky Phillips says Hammerfall.
Yes.
Glory to the Brave was
Yeah.
a kick in the ass to power metal and started up a whole slew of new bands.
Yes, Ricky hit the
yeah.
nail right on the
Yep.
head because
Cool.
the idea with that is that Hammerfall were the first band where there was that excitement about let's not apologize for being metal anymore. Let's
Right.
be pure metal. Let's not worry about hard alternative or grunge or trying to write societal stuff. I mean, even Halloween moved into that with the the strange Pink Bubbles, Go Ape, and Chameleon period. And Gamma Ray even kind of wandered a little. They were trying to do more mature things, I suppose.
Now
But-
here we've got Legacy of Kings.
Yeah.
Ricky is talking about Glory to the Brave.
Right,
I
so-
mean, what's your thoughts on
So,
that?
so this is the second album, 98. That's the first album, 97. Either
Right.
or. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of figure they hit their stride a little bit on this one. So
Okay.
I would argue this one, and you're getting a little deeper into the the period when this is big. But they covered Warlord, and they love Accept. Accept is a great precursor band.
Right.
So this is really the band that kicked it off. There was the most excitement around them than anybody.
Okay, very cool. Hammerfall is up there. Some say Glory to the Brave, some say Legacy of Kings. But I think we're going to go to Gamma Ray here. We're seeing a lot of Gamma Ray on the board. Stuka187 says Gamma Ray Insanity and Genius is great. Last Before the Storm makes the hair on my arms tingle. Disju says Land of the Free pretty much epitomizes non-symphonic power metal. Your thoughts on Gamma Ray?
Yeah, I would definitely go with Land of the Free more than Insanity and Genius or Heading or Tomorrow for Tomorrow or any of those. Because basically here they are hitting their stride and almost moving back into this Hammerfall situation where it is pure, unadulterated, a love of metal. It's very Maiden-esque and Priest-esque, fast, very melodic. Gamma Ray almost annoyingly, as time moves on, they will be so absolutely, truly power metal.
Right.
So yeah, they basically, and again, they're one of the bands that has to get marks for toiling away when it was completely unfashionable.
Right. Very cool.
So
Yes, Lisa.
Yeah, I think we have a few last comments about Manowar, but
Okay.
I just want to remind people it's about the records.
Yes.
So people are telling us about the bands. We need you to talk about the albums.
So
specifically.
listen to the boss, everybody. Lisa says it's about the records this week, not just about the bands. We're boiling it down. We're getting even nerdier, if you can possibly imagine. We want to talk about the essential albums of power metal. Okay, so the Nightmare Rider says Manowar is so anthemic, they embody the grandiose and cheesiness of power metal, some acknowledgement of the humor, perhaps, that should be embodied in power metal. And the Fujak is back, who says Manowar are the legends and deserve to be at the top of the pile. The fact that they were Yanks and took power metal to the world by saying thanks with Hail to England is simply awesome. So we'll see where the dust settles. Maybe we'll erase the question mark at some point.
Yeah, I suppose. And Hail to England, I mean, that's a really good point brought up here because it's the Hail to England was a result of Kerrang and those magazines being very friendly to Iron Maiden, to Manowar,
Right.
but America, finding it a complete joke sort of thing.
Right.
And so this is, they're going in there at the tail end of the new wave British heavy metal, and they're, that record actually got, most of the copies out there are English copies of that record. And the Hail to England basically says, yes, we're taking this stuff and we're recognizing it's a European thing, metal at this point.
And you brought up Iced Earth earlier, of course. There is some, tradition of power metal that happens in the U.S., perhaps partly of the influence of Manowar. What's next, Lisa?
Well, one of our regulars, Horror Master, has said, "Where's DragonForce?"
Oh.
And I actually have a hint.
Okay.
Which is the answer is on the phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the word is out that you can call into Lock Horns now. So
Uh-oh.
we actually have Sam from DragonForce on the phone.
Is it a 1866 number? I hope not.
I hope
Anyway,
not.
pow. Sam, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
Hey, man, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Not quite as drunk as I saw you last time. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. For everyone out there, last time I saw Sam Topman was backstage at Wacken this year, and we were both enjoying a few beverages, as one should, at Wacken. So, Sam, what do you make of all this power metal talk? Do you have some favorite power metal albums in your collection?
Yeah. I mean, I saw the one you put up on the board there, and I agree with that for sure. Like I was going to say, Land of the Free actually that's one of the first ones I ever heard.
Yeah.
And but I didn't even realise that it kind of was power metal at the time. This was like back when it came out. Like I was still in New Zealand, and my friend brought it back from Europe, and I was like, man, this is the best thing ever. I didn't really know what it was. I just knew I liked it. Or order it or anything.
Right.
So I had that album. I didn't get the next album until sort of like maybe 4 or 5 years later, whenever the next one came out, like the Somewhere Out in Space. And I definitely agree with what you guys are saying for sure.
Are there any other albums that were influential for you, sort of in the power metal area that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think that for me, like, one of my favourite ones of all time is it's actually the Luca Turilli solo album, the first one, King of the Nordic Twilight. That was that was a big, huge influence when we first started DragonForce. That was one of my favourite albums, and there's all kinds of stuff that I was so into that album at the time. And Stratovarius, Destiny, that was one of my. I got it wasn't the first one I heard, but I think that's probably my favorite one, actually.
Very cool. Luke Turilli, am I right? Is Rhapsody of Fire?
I'll do
Oh,
my
Martin's
one
correcting my
contribution
spelling.
to the.
Oh, Luca Turilli. I'm revealing my power metal ignorance here on the show. Is it Rhapsody? Rhapsody
Yeah,
of
Rhapsody
Fire?
of Fire,
Okay,
formerly just called Rhapsody
Right,
Italian.
yes, of course.
They called themselves soundtrack metal. I mean,
Right.
they went beyond symphonic to soundtrack metal
Right.
because they just wanted, they had spoken word all through this stuff
Right.
and a lot of symphonic stuff. The Italians were the most dramatic of all.
For sure, for sure. And Sam, what do you make of the fact that, when people talk about DragonForce, they often use the power metal term to describe you guys. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair enough to say. I mean, that's kind of what we're all about, and we just all love that kind of music. When we first kind of all got together, I know me and Herman, we were like, oh, let's do a band because we just loved all that stuff, Rhapsody and Stratovarius and Labyrinth, another great album. That's their first one. Well, not probably, I don't know which one it is. Return to Heaven Denied. We were really into that too at the time. And yeah, I mean, I don't mind calling people want to say we're power metal because we totally are. And I mean, that's kind of we just tried to make a band that kind of involved all our favourite bits of all the albums that we liked. We always thought that there was too many slow songs on all our favourite albums. There were too many ballads and slow mid-tempo songs. We just like the fast stuff.
Yeah, well, you
So
guys know.
just make an album that's always fast, and then here we are, how many years later, still doing the same thing. So yeah, I still love it. So yeah, why not?
You're tracking some clocking in some serious BPMs with DragonForce. Lisa, do we have some DragonForce love on the board?
Yeah.
So Sam, these are the things that people are saying about DragonForce. This is Man-Like Graveworm. He says, Sam, I love you. Thank you. You fucking legend. Get Inhuman Rampage on this board. That album is a power itself. Nightmare Rider says Valley of the Damned defined DragonForce. Inhuman Rampage took it to the next level. Fast, melodic, cheesy, and Infinite Possibility says that DragonForce are influential. Can you name any other power metal band that has risen to such heights and enjoying the same level of success during the 2000s? And it just so happens we have a Valley of the Damned magnet. Sam, what do you think of that magnet? Pretty sweet, eh?
Oh, there you go, not bad.
Although it sounds like that might not be the right record.
Well, I don't know. Inhuman Rampage, I mean, for you, Sam, those are the two albums that people are talking about. I know it's hard for a musician himself to pick his favorites. It's like choosing your children, but is any one of those more important in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, well, the funny thing is when we always said that when we did Inhuman Rampage, we actually thought that it wasn't as good as Sonic Firestorm. We were like, oh no, we didn't like it as much. And then in the end, now looking back on it all now, I think it is pretty cool, right? But yeah, I mean, you just do the best you can at the time. So I think it's kind of like any band guy always tell you the same thing, right? You can't really compare them all because you were at a different time of your life and you got better or worse at your instrument or whatever. And or better or had more ideas or less ideas for songs and that kind of thing. So I mean, I love them all, and for what they are, I think probably Sonic Firestorm was my favourite. I think that's when we first I felt like we'd done something that was a bit unique, I thought Valley of the Dam was kind of pretty standard stuff, and I thought Sonic Firestorm we kind of found our identity a little bit.
Very cool. Well, Sam, you know what? I want to thank you for calling in. That's super cool. We really appreciate it. I know people who comment here love to hear from the artists themselves. And you know what? I hope the next time I see you, we are once again drinking at a giant metal festival. So good to hear from you, mate.
Absolutely, man. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cool.
Old school.
Excellent.
Just pull out the phones.
Yeah.
Landline.
1-866 banger. No, don't
No.
dial that. Whatever you do. Anyway, Lisa, what are we doing next?
That's a different film production
That
company.
is a different
completely.
industry.
We have a lot of bands,
Okay.
and some new ones, some old ones. Stradivarius has been coming up.
Okay, let's go to the board. Stradivarius, Superjoint, Sam, We Are Many, Stradivarius Visions, Get It There, and Tritonus Satan. That's a good one. Stradivarius Visions, the landmark of Nordic power metal and defining album of Stradivarius's career. Well, it just so happens.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this album, Mark?
It's a good choice. You know, it's mid-career again.
It's a great choice.
Yeah, it's a great choice.
Martin
in fact,
told us to print the
yes,
magnet.
exactly. There you go. It better be a good
Totally
choice.
caught us by surprise.
But no, it's probably the one that gets the most votes. I mean, they've made a lot of albums since. They made a lot of albums before. Again, they were one of the bands that was toiling away. But you know, the Finnish sound also gets talked about. We always talk about Finnish doom, but they're also very good at power metal, and it's very high and melodic and keyboardy and the whole deal. I mean, I almost feel like these guys are probably the biggest descendants of.
And this is Timo Tolkki, of course.
Yes,
who's
yeah.
regarded, I think, as one of the real. Talk about picking up a torch from that guy.
Yeah.
I remember we were in Bologna filming the Power Metal episode at
Right.
the Guitar
Yeah.
Fest, and it was just like Yngwie and like Timo. Like I lost count at the millionth
Exactly.
note. It was
Guitar
pretty,
Hero stuff,
Pretty,
yeah.
pretty crazy stuff.
For sure.
So yeah, a pretty important record.
Yeah.
But I think maybe Lisa, people want to talk a bit about some older bands. Maybe we're going to reach back a little bit deeper.
I'm trying to get the Stratovarius comments up here.
Oh.
There's a lot of chat about a lot of groups. So,
Okay, well, let's
just
start
bear-
with
just bear with
Danis
me.
Lil Makeup. Stradivarius is essential. I would also pick Destiny from them. Do you know this record, Destiny?
Yeah, I mean, but like I say, almost everybody's going to pick this one. When you look at lists of greatest Stradivarius albums, it's this. I mean, I would also go with Elements Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah.
I like a lot as well, but no, this is a good choice. And what I like about some of these choices are, I look at this, the big time for power metal was between 95 and about 2003, and that's why I like picking this one, because this was the most excitement around the genre itself. The band got even bigger.
Okay.
Ultra Beatdown, Inhuman Rampage, those were big albums. They were charting in a lot of places for DragonForce, which is very cool. And they're British, which is great.
Yeah.
Because it draws back to that new wave British heavy metal. But
Sure.
no, I think this is the more or less unanimous
Okay,
choice.
let's cool. Let's see what people have to say. Zach Steer says Stradivarius's Episode was also a great album. If we're talking about them, Paul Leach, and there's a reason. There's a rainbow on the Stradivarius.
Well,
cover.
there's a nice segue to the old stuff that we were. So yeah, so the idea, I guess, with the chart and moving forward as we do these album things, hopefully. There are places for things like Rainbow Rising. Rainbow Rising and Sad Wings of Destiny are really the godfathers of power metal even before this.
Right.
And Stained Class and Sin After Sin. And if you want to go back even further, maybe Deep Purple and Rock. This is the one place where we don't talk about Black Sabbath too much. And we
Right.
don't talk about any American bands,
Right.
really. So Rainbow's super important. Of course, that begets Ronnie James Dio, and then we got a whole extra can of worms where, the first two Dio albums are seminal power metal, and there you're getting
Right.
in the 80s. You've got Holy
Yeah.
Diver and Last in Line, and you've got Black Sabbath Heaven and Hell, which is
Right.
always talked about
That's
in
a
this
good
discussion.
point. Well, you got some support here. Paul Leach agrees Rainbow Rising because the albums on the board already wouldn't exist without it. I think we would agree. And Famandrugany, I'm going to give it a shot this time.
Yeah.
Kim, what about Rainbow Rising is the absolute root of power metal?
Absolutely.
Interesting point. Well, maybe do I squeeze it in above the
If
essential
you're allowed
albums?
to
Do
put
we-
it in,
do we
it
boldly-
belongs because
I think it's on the top.
Is it on the top?
We
I don't
can-
know
you
if I
can
can.
you can use an
sure.
arrow.
I can. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Rainbow Rising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting point, because it really was establishing that super epic sound even before, and it sort of drags up this sort of academic topic, which is when does it really start? I mean, this
Yeah.
is like these are lines in the sand. Aren't
And if that's not going to go anywhere else on any list, that's a travesty, because it's such a huge classic
Right.
album, and so it really belongs here as the root.
It's got to go
Sure.
somewhere. Okay,
Yep.
big shout out to Rainbow Rising. I think that's a pretty sound contribution, that maybe it is the ultimate proto power metal album, maybe is one way to look at it.
One more thing
Or
to mention about
maybe it's
Rainbow
the first
Rising.
power metal. Yes.
First album we ever got as kids that had no mellow songs on it. It has 4 heavy songs on one side, 2 heavy songs on the other side. It was that, then AC/DC Let There Be Rock, then
Right.
the Sex Pistols.
Right.
Those were the first 3, and that was the first one that had no mellow songs whatsoever.
There you go. Might have been the first metal album that ever had the word or an image of a rainbow in it, too. I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know. Rosalie Laplante. Okay, we got some new additions here.
Yeah.
We're going to move on. So let me just step back, Lisa, to do some officiating here. Do we want to get 10 and precisely 10? Is that the objective?
We're looking for the top 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Good
we need
discipline.
some more candidates.
Right.
Yeah.
So we got 7 or 8 if we include Rainbow Rising.
Or
So-
9 if we include Manowar.
Or
So
9 if we
And
include
we're out of
Manowar.
these things, so
Hail to
now
England.
we're into
all
the
your
fan
picks.
choices,
So
basically.
now, we need a minimum, let's say it could be 1, it could be 2, could be 3. Let's see
But
where
we,
things
but we
go.
are kind of in the final 5 minutes of
Yep.
arguing,
Yep.
so we need to hear why. We
Okay.
really need to hear why.
So speak up, people. If you've got additions, we need to hear them and hear them fast. The clock is ticking. We don't have a lot of time left. Rosalie Laplante says Sonata fucking Arctica. Please,
Please isn't good enough. You
Please
gotta
isn't
tell
good
us
enough.
why.
Attaboy, I have to push Epica by Camelot. It's such an amazing record with great music and beautiful ballads, not to mention it is a concept. Record, Martin, any initial thoughts on those two?
You know what? Since we're at 8 or 9, I'd say can them. They can't go on because I have a couple others that I think should go on ahead of them. I mean, we're down into that range where there's Falconer and Mob Rules and White Skull and all that. I mean, I had Ecliptica as well on my list. I've got various lists going, but that was definitely one of them. Who else?
You realize you're taking on
Yeah.
the Mensa of power metal here, people, so you better really bring it, otherwise you will be crushed by
Well, we
the
don't
mind.
have much left. We don't have
Matthias
much left.
Linerut says Sabaton
Yes.
should be on the board. Art of War takes power metal into a new direction.
Exactly.
And with epic history lessons, and M. Seabrook, I think, agrees. Yes, Sabaton, newer band, but
Yeah.
one of the modern driving forces in power metal. Art of War features all the best elements, historical lyrics, epic vocals, chanty choruses, kick-ass showmanship, and Nightmare Rider is back. Sabaton, Art of War.
Yeah.
20th century warfare lyrics, amazing vocals, and epic sound.
Absolutely,
Okay,
I
we
totally
got some
agree. That would
consensus
be
there.
one of the last two that I would
Good,
want to put
pardon me, I'm
on
gonna put it
because
over here.
they are an exciting band that is making a lot of waves. They're putting out a lot of records. Art of War, I believe it's 2008. They're headlining over 2 or 3 other bands every time they come through every town. They're a beloved band, and I like the fact that they're probably this era's DragonForce. I mean, DragonForce are the band that the early 2000s up to the 2010 period. Sabaton is our our favorite. New
Well, it
power
is
metal
really a
band now.
shout out. You said 2008. That's quite a
Yeah.
modern record
Yeah.
compared to everything
So,
here, with maybe the exception
to give us hope for this genre.
of Dragon
There we
and
go.
DragonForce.
Yeah.
Sabaton keeps the torch
Yeah.
burning for power metal. Jason Owen says yes, Sabaton, and King Snafu says we need Sabaton. They're carrying the banner. Okay, I think we got some consensus there. We've got 8 for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe a 9 if we include Radio Rising. Maybe a 10 if we're going to go with Hail to England by Manowar. Lisa, what's happening out there?
Just a lot of people saying the names of bands, and I
Okay.
can't help you when you
Yeah.
do that, Angra fans. Like,
Okay.
you need to give me
Exactly.
something to work with.
Tell us how you. So put it this way: if we don't get any additions, I think Rainbow Rising will be added as like the proto or first power metal record, and we'll have to add Manowar too because we had a lot of Manowar.
But I do have to mention the burning band missing for me that has to go on here is Iced Earth. Iced
Okay.
Earth is a massive band, huge in this genre. They're American, which is a bit of an anomaly. They have a little bit of a different sound, a little bit more thrash, a little bit more Metallica to their sound. But that doesn't matter. They're considered a huge power metal band.
So would you take Iced Earth over Manowar then?
I think I would, just because that there's some sacrilege to that, but that's going so far back, and given that album isn't even the sound, Iced Earth, they are also one of the bands that was toiling away, starting at the very beginning of the 90s, but they the Dark Saga
Yep.
or something Wicked This Way Comes, 96, 98 sort of period. I think that has to go in here. They made a ton of concept albums. They made over a dozen albums. So I love all these bands. I'm seeing all these comments. Definitely, there's another dozen bands that
Sure.
could go on here, but I think Iced Earth is the one band.
Well, before we commit that to stone, Clayton Biscalcini says, please, Angra, Temple of Shadows or Fireworks, great albums that really define the line between power metal and prog.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Angra?
Yeah, prog metal, not prog.
Yep.
But they're definitely right in there as a as a power metal band. They're the representatives of Brazil. I mean, and they were a pretty big band. They made a lot of records as well. But again, I have to say, if we're down to brass tacks, it's Iced Earth.
Okay, what is the Iced Earth record?
Let's
that you're
go with
recommending?
Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Okay.
Yeah. 98,
Iced
I
Earth.
believe.
So chime in, people. Time is running short. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Jason Owen. Yes, Iced Earth is more power metal than Manowar, and as great as Manowar is. Do we have anything else? So we've got another mention of Angra here. Angra is making a late push. Artemisia 94 says Angra Holy Land is a flawless album.
Yeah.
I would give more reasons, but my English is far from being perfect. Angra needs to be there.
That would be my choice for Angra album.
Getting
so
some
we'll-
love,
Yeah.
some love.
I'm seeing Savatage over there. I mean, again, we're back to the precursors, but again, great American early power metal stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna just put Angra maybe
Yeah.
on the side here.
Yeah.
What's the album in your
Holy
opinion?
Land. I'd
Is
say
it Holy Land?
Yeah.
Holy Land, and I think on the board we may have a few Hail Marys coming in. What do we have, Lisa? Dennis, a little makeup. Yeah, Something Wicked This Way Comes is the shit. So you're getting some consensus there, Martin. But I don't know, Lisa.
Well, I mean, you know, Sam.
I think it's Martin Popoff 1, everyone else 0.
Because I love the people on the chart as much as I love the fact that Sam called us, I have to point out that a lot of people don't think DragonForce should be in the top 10.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boy, I think they should. They're just so famous.
Jonathan
They're so big.
Perez says pull DragonForce or Sabaton off and add Angra's Holy Land concept album that blends Brazilian folk, touring the full album to this day. Okay, so what do we got? We could make an argument. We can be Canadian here. Maybe we can all get along. If we don't include Rainbow Rising, we've got 7, 8, 9. Maybe Angra goes over.
Sure.
Maybe Angra
and
is
if
on
we
the
pull
list.
that away, and it makes this more pure, true metal, which is kind of a trait of power metal. If you want to really kind of tighten the parameters on it, you can remove some of those outliers.
Okay, Lisa, maybe we're gonna do an executive decision here. Rainbow Rising is proto power metal. Angra belongs along with Sabaton and Iced Earth and the 7 that Martin Popoff has brought to the table. Can we all get along?
With an honorary mention for Sonata Arctica Ecliptica, because it comes up a lot, although no one tells me why.
Point.
So,
Yeah.
half a point.
Yeah.
Honorary mention for my giant reindeer stein. No. Although Giant Reindeer Stein would make a good album name, perhaps.
So I think that's it.
Okay.
We have these epic album covers here that are lovely, and I think that's going to be our list.
Okay, are we going to comment of the week before we wrap things up? Do you have a favorite?
Oh yeah, I think it was the guy who gave us the long list of
Yes, that was
the,
epic.
the epic list
Amazing.
of the classical
So
elements.
in fact,
yeah.
it's the first
Where to go,
time that a comment of the week has been so long that we don't have time to repeat it. But it was an
Exactly.
It was
extensive,
Psychiata Sound.
And he was 18 years
and he was
old.
18.
very impressive classical analysis. Thank you very much. So Martin, thank you
Okay,
for joining
yes.
us.
Thank
there
you.
we go.
That was fun.
We've determined that these are the 10 essential power metal albums. I'm sure the boards will continue to debate. I want to thank Martin for joining me. Of course, Lisa, Daniel, Andrew, and Craig. As a reminder, for those of you watching this in the live stream, it will be archived. If you missed it live, come and find us Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the channel. Get us to 100K. It's a long road, but we're going to get there. Follow us on Apple Music, Banger's official metal curator over there. Next week, you thought power metal was weird. No, I didn't mean that. We're going new metal. Sam Sutherland is going to join me in here for probably the most contentious, the most locking of all horns, new metal. That's next week here in the Banger Bar. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us.